I want you to think about the word family. For most people, it means unconditional love. For me, it meant a constant, suffocating judgment. I grew up as Sierra Preston, daughter of one of the city's wealthiest real estate moguls, Arthur Preston. Our life was measured in status, net worth, and social power. My entire world shattered when I chose to marry Adam. Adam wasn't just my husband. He was my father's nephew, a relative from the wrong side of the family tree, the son of my father's younger brother, David, who went bankrupt 20 years ago in what the family politely called a failed venture. They saw Adam as a living, breathing stain on the Preston name, a permanent reminder of a failed lineage. I walked away from a guaranteed partnership in a prestigious legal firm and accepted being disinherited to be with him. I sacrificed my place in their gilded cage to be with him. I simply loved him. Until the night they dared to insult the dignity of the man I chose. That night, I didn't make a scene. I went home, and in complete silence, I planned a legal maneuver so devastating, it not only ruined them financially, but finally delivered justice for a crime they committed 2 decades ago, a crime that cost Adam his father. Before I tell you exactly what was written in the letter that made my parents scream, let me know, what is the most unforgivable insult you have ever received from a family member? Share it, anonymously, in the comments below. And if you believe that sometimes silence is the most powerful form of vengeance, please hit that subscribe button right now to join our community. This is the story of how I used their own rules to tear down their kingdom, fulfilling a justice that had been denied for 20 years. My father, Arthur Preston, the patriarch, was obsessed with legacy. His legacy was built on ruthlessness and a flawless reputation. When I first brought Adam home, fresh out of law school, my mother, Diana, didn't hide her disdain. "He's a school teacher, Sierra. What kind of security is that? He is his father all over again, weak, emotional, and broke," she had sneered. Adam's father, Uncle David, was never mentioned, except in whispers of pity or contempt. 20 years ago, Uncle David ran a modest, but promising real estate firm. He was kind, ethical, and loved his family. My father, Arthur, was his financial mentor. Then, suddenly, the firm collapsed. Uncle David lost everything, suffered a massive heart attack from the stress, and died 6 months later. The family narrative was simple: he was incompetent. The truth, I would later find, was infinitely darker. When I chose Adam, my parents cut me off financially and socially. We lived modestly. We were happy, but the shadow of their disapproval was always there, especially since we couldn't avoid the family gatherings completely. They used our presence as a chance to reinforce their superiority. The event was the annual Preston Family Investors Dinner, held at our family's sprawling estate. It was a masquerade of wealth. This year, my father was finalizing a massive, multi-million-dollar real estate deal in New York, and all his major backers were present. The tension in the air was palpable. Adam and I arrived late, due to his evening class running over. My mother barely gave us a nod. Adam was already nervous. "This feels like walking into a cage, Sierra," he confessed to me in the car. The seating was immediately humiliating. The main mahogany table was reserved for the power players. Adam and I were directed to a small, round table set far from the main action, the overflow table, where 4 name cards lay: a distant cousin, an elderly aunt, myself, and Adam. But on the table, there were 4 name cards and only 3 chairs. I immediately saw the error, or rather, the calculated slight. Adam, always trying to minimize conflict, pulled an empty chair from a nearby serving station. He was just about to settle in when my father, Arthur, stood up from the main table, tapping his glass. The room fell silent. He didn't look at Adam with anger, but with the cold, scientific contempt he reserved for failed investments. "Adam," my father's voice boomed, sharp and clear. "I need you to leave that chair right where it is. We are short on seating for our more vital guests. This evening is reserved for those who actively contribute to the Preston legacy. I'm sorry, but we simply do not have a seat reserved for a high school teacher. You understand, of course? We must be efficient with our resources." The silence that followed was a physical blow. Adam's entire body stiffened. His face, usually open and kind, closed completely. I saw the shame, not for himself, but for me. The insult wasn't just about a chair, it was a public declaration that he was worthless, that his contribution to the world was irrelevant, and that my choice to marry him was a failure. Adam nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine, a profound moment of understanding passing between us. He placed the chair back. He didn't say a word to anyone. He simply turned, walked through the shimmering ballroom, and vanished. My mother, Diana, leaned towards me, her voice low and venomous. Honestly, Sierra, why can't you just accept that some people don't belong here? Now, stop staring and go back to your table. I didn't move. I looked at the table of smug, self-satisfied faces. I looked at my mother's cold eyes. I felt a surge of cold fury that eclipsed all emotion. I knew then that there would be no scene, no argument. I didn't owe them a single word. I simply looked at my father, who was already turning his attention back to his rich investors, and I walked out. I found Adam in our small apartment kitchen, just as I suspected. He was eating cold leftover Chinese food straight from the carton. The humiliation had stripped him of any pretense of normalcy. They did it again, Sierra, he said, his voice flat. 20 years ago, my father walked out of that house and never came back. Tonight, I did the same. They will never respect us. You're right, I said, walking to the pantry. And I made a scene, didn't I? I walked out like a dramatic fool. But you didn't. You took the humiliation and you ate your leftovers. You were dignified. Now, it's my turn to be efficient. I didn't utter another emotional word that night. I was no longer a hurt wife. I was a focused legal weapon. I opened my old law school trunk and pulled out the legal encyclopedia where I had been storing the only thing I took from my parents' house, a confidential, original deed of conveyance my father had misplaced years ago. The focus of my investigation was the Thornton acquisition from 20 years ago, the deal that bankrupted Adam's father. I spent the next 7 hours, from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., poring over old electronic land registry documents and corporate filings using my old legal database access, which my firm had carelessly forgotten to revoke. I discovered 2 critical truths. The predatory loan, my father, Arthur, had given Uncle David a massive, unsecured short-term bridge loan, with the explicit agreement that if the loan defaulted, which Arthur ensured it would, the entire Thornton portfolio would transfer instantly at a heavily discounted rate. This was not a business failure, it was calculated theft. The environmental trap, more crucially, buried in the original unexecuted contract drafts, which I cross-referenced with my original deed, was a clause detailing a massive, undisclosed environmental contamination liability tied to one of the Thornton properties. My father had actively suppressed this liability to complete the deal. This was a severe federal crime that could lead to criminal charges and civil litigation for the current owner, Arthur Preston. I realized the immense power I now held. This wasn't just a financial attack, it was total systemic breakdown. I used my knowledge to draft 3 devastating documents. A formal complaint of environmental non-disclosure and fraud addressed to the state regulatory authority and simultaneously filed against Preston Holdings. This required immediate legal action and freeze of assets. A highly detailed and documented memorandum to the board of directors, exposing the legal and ethical rot at the foundation of the company's wealth, the predatory loan against Uncle David. I signed this document with a single anonymous phrase, "Justice for David." A warning letter to my father's major New York investors, detailing the environmental liability and the potential for federal investigation, effectively turning the entire New York deal into financial poison. By dawn, the letters and documents were sent via registered mail, fax, and encrypted email to all relevant parties. I had unleashed a storm. Adam woke up and found me sitting at the kitchen table, calmly drinking coffee. "You look like you haven't slept, Sierra. Are you okay?" "I am perfectly fine, Adam," I said, a dangerous calm in my voice. "I have never been better." At 8:30 a.m., the morning silence was shattered by a sound I had never heard before, my mother's high-pitched, hysterical, piercing scream. It echoed across the neighborhood. We walked outside. My parents were standing at the edge of their manicured lawn, next to the mailbox. My father, Arthur, the powerful mogul, was holding the legal letter from the state authority, his face the color of ash, his hands shaking violently. My mother was clutching her throat, sobbing uncontrollably. "Arthur, the New York deal, it's frozen. The board is calling you. They say the EPA is sending inspectors." "Who did this?" my mother wailed, pulling at her hair. My father looked at the documents, his eyes darting frantically. "It's worse than the liability, Diana. The board's memorandum. Someone knew about the Thornton acquisition. Someone knew about the loan. They know about David. They know the truth from 20 years ago." They were panicking, unable to comprehend the scale of the coordinated attack. I walked out calmly, holding a second cup of coffee for Adam. I looked directly at my father, who stared at me with immediate suspicion. "Is there a problem, Uncle Arthur? You seem distressed. Did you find a chair for your necessary guest today?" I asked, my voice soft but deadly. He looked at me, realizing I was the only person with the motive and the legal knowledge. You are a lawyer. Did you know anything about this liability? Did you file this?" I smiled, a cold, empty smile that held 20 years of suppressed pain. "I gave up my career to leave your world, Father. But I didn't give up my knowledge. You taught me that in this family, if you aren't at the table, you are on the menu." My mother started weeping, pointing a trembling finger at Adam. "You did this for that, for him, for a chair. You ruined us for a petty insult." "No, Mom," I said, walking towards the front door, leaving them standing there amidst the rubble of their empire. "I didn't do it for a chair. I did it for his father's grave. You made my husband feel worthless, and I showed you the price of true worth, integrity. You taught me that success is measured by who you exclude. Well, you just excluded yourselves from the elite forever. You cheated Adam's father out of his life and his fortune. I simply brought the bill for 20 years of interest." Adam walked up to me, putting a protective arm around me. We didn't need their wealth. We had our dignity. We walked away from the crumbling mansion and the hysterical screams of the family who had just lost everything. I had fulfilled my promise to Adam's father's memory and freed myself from the Preston curse. We are now living in a new city, far from the Preston drama. I practice law on a smaller, more meaningful scale, focusing on environmental justice, and Adam is still teaching history. I gained my husband's love and the respect of his deceased father, but the cost was losing every remaining shred of my own family. I ask you, the viewer, was my revenge too harsh? Did my parents deserve to lose everything for an insult? Or was I right to use the law to seek justice for a 20-year-old financial murder? Comment below and let me know. And if you believe that true wealth is measured in dignity, please like the video and share it with a friend who understands the meaning of standing up for what's right. Thank you for listening to my final act of justice.